What would you do if the maid in your mansion suddenly started speaking fluent Arabic? Better than your CEO? Layla thought she was invisible. But one phone call would change everything. Comment below which city you're watching from and enjoy this inspiring story about love, talent, and second chances. Layla Moreno moved quickly across the polished floors of the Bennett estate, wiping down the glass desk in Carter Bennett's executive home office. The quiet rhythm of her work was the only sound in the mansion that morning. Tuesdays were her favorite. Mr. Bennett was usually out all day, buried in back-to-back investor meetings. It gave her a few hours to think, hum quietly, and sometimes even dream. But today, something interrupted the quiet. The landline on the desk began to ring. Layla flinched. It wasn't her job to answer phones, and she never dared go near Carter's desk. The last time a maid had tried, she was fired. But the phone kept ringing, 10, 11, 15 times. Her hands stopped. What if it's important, she thought. What if someone needs to reach him urgently? Biting her lip, she took off her rubber gloves and cautiously picked up the receiver. Good. Morning, Bennett residence, she said, trying to sound calm. A pause. Then a deep, firm male voice spoke, not in English, but in Arabic. Layla's heart jolted, without hesitation. Gas, she responded, also in Arabic, her tone smooth and respectful. Mr. Bennett is not available at the moment. May I take a message? For him, there was another pause, this time from the caller. Then, you speak Arabic fluently? Yes, sir. How may I assist you? Samir Al-Fulan, calling from Zafira. I have a very urgent business proposal for Mr. Bennett. What? Layla didn't know, couldn't know, was that at that exact moment, Carter Bennett had returned early from his meeting. He stepped inside, loosened his tie, paused. There was a voice, a woman's voice coming from his private office. He crept toward the door. And when he peeked inside, what he saw stunned him. Layla, the quiet maid who barely made eye contact, the one who scrubbed floors and arranged his papers. She was seated at his desk, speaking flawless Arabic, not basic phrases, not memorized greetings, but the kind of conversational elegance and vocabulary that even he, with a degree in international relations, couldn't match. She wasn't just answering a call, she was handling it like a diplomatic assistant. Carter froze, completely mesmerized. Yes, Mr. Samir. She continued, scribbling notes. When would you like Mr. Bennett to return your call? As soon as possible? It's regarding a $50 million investment partnership. Understood. I'll make sure he receives your message. Just then, Layla ended the call and turned only. To find Carter standing in the doorway, she gasped, nearly dropping the phone. Her face flushed with panic. Double quotes. Mr. Bennett, I didn't know you were home. I'm sorry, the phone kept ringing and He raised a hand. Layla, he asked slowly, how long have you spoken Arabic? Her voice trembled. Just the basics, sir. But Carter wasn't buying it. That was not basic Arabic. That was elite. Carter Bennett didn't move. His eyes were locked on Layla Moreno, the woman he'd barely noticed for 8 months, the one who cleaned his home, his office, even once folded his ties, just the way he liked them. But now, for the first time, he truly saw her. Layla. That wasn't basic Arabic. We're discussing a $50 million proposal with an investor I've been trying to reach for weeks. Layla lowered her gaze, fingers fidgeting with the hem of her cleaning apron. I didn't mean to overstep, sir. I only answered because it kept ringing. I thought it might be urgent. It was. And you handled it like a professional interpreter. Long pause filled the room. Then Carter stepped closer, eyes narrowing slightly. So let me ask you, who are you really? Layla looked up slowly. Not her story, not in this house. I'm just your cleaning staff, Mr. Bennett. No, that's what you do, not who you are. Silence. Then softly Layla spoke. I studied applied linguistics at Sunridge State University. Graduated with honors. Specialized in Middle Eastern languages. I interned in Morocco for a semester. So why? Why are you working here, cleaning floors? Layla swallowed, then forced herself to speak the painful truth because no one hired me. For anything else, I went to dozens of interviews. But when they saw my name, my face, my background, she stopped. They saw a housekeeper, not a consultant. Carter leaned back slightly as if the weight of her words struck deeper than he expected. He glanced at the note she had written for him, Samir Alfilan's number, circled neatly. Beneath it, her handwriting read, $50 million. Urgent. Mention cultural integration in Miami hotels. You caught all that from one call? I listened well, Mr. Bennett. Carter stared at her. The room was still. Then he muttered to himself, I've had 6 interns with MBAs, and none of them could do what you just did. Layla blinked, uncertain. Of whether that was praise or criticism, I need to return this call, Carter said, stepping toward the phone. Then he glanced back. Stay. We need to talk after. Layla nodded. Her heart pounded. She just exposed a piece of her truth. But what Carter would do with it? That was the real question. Layla stood silently near the door, unsure whether she should leave or stay. Carter had told her to wait, but what did that mean? Her palms were damp, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Was he angry? Would he fire her? Or worse, report her for crossing boundaries? On the other side of the room, Carter Bennett sat in his executive chair, already dialing the number she'd left on the note. His posture had shifted, no longer relaxed and careless, but sharp, focused. Mr. Alfulan, Carter said in Arabic, when the call connected. This is Carter Bennett. I was informed you have a proposal for me. Layla's eyes widened. She hadn't known Carter could speak Arabic. He spoke well, polished even, but she still picked up small flaws. Mispronunciations, rigid phrasing. She said nothing, simply watched as the conversation unfolded. Ah, Mr. Bennett, Samir's voice replied with warmth. Your assistant was impressive, sharp and culturally aware. A rare combination. I'd like to meet with you both tomorrow, Carter glanced at Layla, who stiffened at the word assistant. You'd like Layla to attend the meeting? He asked. Yes, Samir said without hesitation. She understood more than most professionals I've dealt with. For a deal this size, cultural precision matters. Carter muted the call and turned to Layla. He wants you at the meeting, as my assistant. Layla's mouth opened. Me? Yes, apparently you've made quite the impression. He muted the call. 3 o'clock tomorrow, downtown Lost Souls. We'll be there. After hanging up, Carter turned his full attention back to Layla. How long have you worked here? 8 months. 8 months. And I never asked what you really did before this. Layla didn't respond. How many languages do you speak, Layla? 6, she said quietly, fluently. And yet, you're dusting shelves. The words hit like a challenge, not at her, but at himself. You've been here all along. In plain sight, a pause, then Carter's voice softened. Come with me to the meeting tomorrow. You're not just attending, you're helping me secure the deal. Layla blinked. But I don't have anything to wear. Leave that. To me, he stood. One more thing. Starting tomorrow, stop calling me Mr. Bennett. Just Carter. Layla smiled nervously. Okay. The next morning, Layla woke up 2 hours earlier than usual. She barely slept the night before. Her thoughts had been a whirlwind, anxiety, excitement, self-doubt, and a little hope. She stared at her small closet. Nothing in there screamed. Executive assistant to a millionaire. Then her phone buzzed. Carter, I'm sending a car to pick you up. We're going shopping. My treat. Don't argue. Layla blinked at the message. She almost replied to protest, but something in her gut told her this wasn't about clothes. This was about preparing for war. Corporate war. 40 minutes later, a sleek black car pulled up in front of her apartment. The driver wore a gray suit and held the door for her like she was royalty. Ms. Moreno. Mr. Bennett is expecting you. Layla stepped in, nerves dancing in her stomach. They arrived at Atelier Solari, the most exclusive boutique in Lost Souls. Carter was already there, dressed casually but polished, crisp white shirt, navy trousers, watch gleaming. "Morning," he greeted her, smiling slightly. "You ready to feel powerful?" "I'm ready to try," she said honestly. Inside, the store shimmered with elegance. Tailored suits, silk blouses, minimalist heels. But what caught Layla off guard were the looks. The sales associates glanced at her modest dress, worn. Shusand offered thin smiles. Carter noticed, "We'll take a full set. She's my business consultant. Treat her accordingly." Layla flushed. "Business consultant?" The staff instantly changed demeanor. One brought sparkling water. Another ushered her into a private fitting suite. Carter sat outside while Layla tried on outfit after outfit: navy blazers, cream-colored trousers, structured blouses that made her feel 10 years older, but 10 times more respected. "Try this one." She stepped out wearing it. Carter's eyes widened slightly. "Perfect," he said. "You look like someone who walks into boardrooms and walks out with contracts." Layla looked at herself in the mirror. The first time in a long time, she saw not just potential, but power. Back at Bennett's downtown office, Layla sat across from Carter in a sleek glass conference room. Her new suit gave her an edge. The receptionist stood up as soon as she saw Carter. "Mr. Bennett, Mr. Alfulan is expecting you. Please, this way." Layla's pulse quickened. Her heels clicked on the marble floor. She caught her reflection in a passing glass wall. The navy suit, the confident posture, and almost didn't recognize herself. In the meeting room, Samir Alfulan stood up to greet them, tall, impeccably dressed, with silver in his beard and sharpness in his eyes. "Mr. Bennett," Samir said, in Arabic, shaking his hand. Then he turned to Layla and Miss Marino. "It's good to meet the voice behind the call." Layla responded without missing a beat. In fluent Arabic with the perfect cultural greeting. "The honor is mine, Mr. Alfulan. Thank you for this opportunity." Samir smiled. "Please, let's begin." The meeting moved swiftly into discussion of the Zafirlo Souls Hotel project. Carter outlined his business vision with clarity. But when it came to cultural adaptations and regional sensitivity, he deferred to Layla, and she shined. She translated nuances between parties. She bridged language gaps with subtle phrasing that made both sides feel understood. She anticipated Samir's hesitations and resolved them before they even formed. When a local investor questioned whether American hospitality could honor Zaffaron traditions, Layla stepped in smoothly. "Respect is not in the structure. It's in the spirit. Our proposal includes separate prayer rooms, culturally tailored menus, and architectural elements that echo the Masharabia, adjusted to Florida's climate." Carter looked at her like he was seeing magic happen. Samir looked impressed. "Ms. Moreno," he said, toward the end of the 2-hour session, "have you ever worked in cultural development before?" Layla shook her head. "No, just studied it and lived it." A long silence. Then Samir turned to Carter. "Mr. Bennett, I'm ready to move forward. But on one condition, of course." "What is it?" "I want Ms. Moreno to be part of the planning team as cultural consultant." Carter blinked. Lala gasped quietly. "This project needs her insight. She speaks the language literally and culturally." Carter smiled. "Then you have yourself a deal." As they left the building, sunlight streaming down the boulevard, Layla couldn't hold it in any longer. Did that really just happen? "It did," Carter said, looking at her with pride. "You didn't just belong in that room, Layla. You ran it." And for the first time, she believed it. Layla sat on the edge of her bed that night, staring at a single email on her laptop screen. Subject: official invitation, cultural, consultant visit to Zafira from Samir Alfulan. Message: Layla, we would be honored to host you in Zafira for an initial planning visit. All travel and accommodations arranged. We believe your insight is crucial as we design this project from the ground up. Her hands trembled as she read the final line. Your voice will help shape a bridge between worlds. She leaned back, stunned. Just 72 hours ago, she was scrubbing the baseboards of Carter Bennett's office. Now, she was being flown to another continent as a consultant. Her phone buzzed. "Carter, pack a bag. You're going to Zafira." She smiled, typed back, "You sure about this? Carter, you earned it. I'll be here when you get back." The next day was a blur. Layla got her passport updated, picked up business cards Carter had printed for her overnight. Layla Moreno, Cultural Integration Specialist, and packed her brand new Navy suit at the airport, a uniformed driver from Zafira International. Holdings was waiting at the gate with her name on a placard. "Welcome to the next phase of your life, Ms. Moreno." On the 14-hour flight, Layla reviewed project documents, rehearsed key phrases in Arabic and French, and stared out the window at the clouds. Somewhere over the Atlantic, a thought struck her. I'm not faking it anymore. I'm really doing it. When she arrived in Zafira, everything felt surreal. The scent of oud and spice filled the warm night air. Her hotel suite overlooked the sea. Almond, dates, almonds, and a note from Yalmond. "Samir, may this journey honor your knowledge and reveal your strength." She felt it. The boardroom was filled with high-level stakeholders. Architects, investors, even a cultural anthropologist flown in from Cairo. Samir greeted her personally at the door. "Layla, welcome. Everyone here has read your Miami adaptation proposal. They're eager to hear your input." She gave a small bow, the appropriate greeting for this region, and sat down, not at the side of the room, but beside Samir. At the main table, for the next 2 hours, Layla did what she was born to do. She outlined how traditional design elements could meet modern luxury expectations and lost souls. She proposed a 3-tiered hospitality approach to accommodate both Western guests and Middle Eastern family structures. She even recommended hiring local artists for architectural features to enhance authenticity. The room was engaged. Notes were taken. Nods exchanged. One investor leaned over to Samir mid-meeting and whispered, but not quietly enough, "She understands us better than half our in-house team." Layla smiled politely, but kept her focus. Afterward, Samir pulled her aside. "Layla, what would you say to a 6-month cultural advisory contract with us? High level, high pay, high travel." Layla's heart skipped. I'd need time to think, of course. Meanwhile, back in Lost Souls, Carter sat at his office desk, scanning a report when his phone buzzed. Message from Layla. "First day done. Might be something bigger coming. Can we talk tonight?" He replied instantly. "Call me anytime. I miss your voice." But then his assistant walked in. "Mr. Bennett, legal flagged something. You need to see this." She'd know exactly how to explain this the right way. Then he paused. No, he wasn't. It wasn't just about business anymore. Layla had just returned to her hotel suite after a long day of back-to-back meetings. When she heard a knock at the door, room service, another investor, she opened it and froze. Carter stood there, slightly out of breath from the desert air, a small duffel bag in hand and the faintest nervous smile on his face. "Hope I'm not crashing your trip." Layla stared, stunned. "What are you doing here?" "I figured if we're going to build this project together, I should probably show up for more than the paperwork." She stepped aside, still processing. "You flew across the world for a meeting?" "Not just a meeting," he said, dropping his bag by the couch. "For you," Layla's heart thudded. "Carter, there's something happening here, Layla, between us. It started with a phone call, but it's grown into something I can't ignore." She sat down slowly, letting the weight of his words settle in the air. "I wasn't sure you saw me that way." "I didn't. Not at first. But the moment. You spoke Arabic on that phone call. It's like you cracked open a door I didn't know was there. Every time I hear you speak, every time you lead a room, I see more of you. No, I like what I see." Layla looked at him, her voice soft. "I thought I had to hide my intelligence, my voice, my dreams, just to survive." "You don't anymore," he said. "Not around me." There was a moment of charged silence. Then Layla asked, "So what now? We start a relationship between flights and boardrooms?" Carter chuckled. "We figure it out. Together." Then he reached into his bag. "Also, I may or may not have brought dinner. Labani's takeout. Your favorite." Layla laughed, the first real laugh she'd allowed herself since she arrived. "In Zafira, you remembered, I pay attention now. They sat cross-legged on the hotel balcony, the lights of Zafira shimmering below, eating takeout from a gold-trimmed box and talking about everything and nothing. It wasn't just business anymore. It was trust, respect, connection, and maybe something dangerously close to love. The saffron sun poured gently through the hotel curtains, casting golden stripes across Layla's face. She stirred awake and turned, half expecting the balcony dinner with Carter to have been a dream. But there he was, asleep on the sofa, still in yesterday's clothes, his blazer folded neatly over the armrest, one hand clutching a notepad scribbled with late-night hotel design ideas. Layla sat up, unsure what to do with the warmth in her chest. The man who once barely looked her in the eye now crossed an ocean just to say, "I see you." She walked quietly to the kitchenette, made a small pot of cardamom tea, sat by the window. A few minutes later, Carter stirred. "You always make mornings smell this good?" he mumbled, hair tousled, voice groggy. Layla smiled over her cup only. "For people who fly 14 hours unannounced?" He stretched and sat up. "I slept like a rock. Zafira air does something to you. Or maybe your conscience is lighter now," she teased. "Maybe," he said, watching her. "Or maybe I'm just exactly where I want to be." The room fell into a quiet rhythm. To people who once lived in separate worlds now sharing the same space. But Layla couldn't ignore what waited ahead. "Carter, what happens when I take this job full-time?" His face grew more serious. "You mean the consultant contract Samir's offering? It's big, it's global, it'll mean more travel, more distance between us?" Carter nodded slowly. "Then I'll just have to travel more too." Layla blinked. "You'd follow me? I'd go with you. There's a difference." He stood and walked toward her. "You've spent your whole life adjusting for the world. Let the world adjust for you, just once. And what about your company? Not going anywhere. And besides, what good is an empire if I build it alone?" Her throat tightened. "Carter." "Layla," he said, stepping even closer. "You changed my business, my mindset, my heart. Not going to lose you to a time zone." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then held it up. "It's Samir. He wants us both at a lunch meeting. Says he has news that might reshape everything." Layla took a slow breath. "Then I guess we'd better find out what that means." Layla and Carter arrived at Dar Al-Myra, one of Zafira's most elegant rooftop restaurants, just before noon. Gold lanterns hung delicately above linen-covered tables, and the scent of grilled saffron chicken mingled with ocean breeze. Samir Al-Fulan was already waiting, seated under a white canopy, sipping mint tea. "Ah, my favorite American team," he said, standing to greet them. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss." As soon as they settled, Samir dove straight in. "The hotel project is officially greenlit. All investors are on board." Carter and Layla exchanged a quick smile. It's that part they had expected, but there's more, Samir continued eyes. "Now on Layla, we're not just building a hotel. We're expanding into a brand. Zafira 2 Global, and I want you, Layla, to lead the cultural integration division across all regions, starting with Miami, Seoul, and Jakarta." Layla's breath caught. "You want me to? What, a full-time executive role? Permanent? With freedom to structure your own team and strategy?" Carter froze beside her. "That's massive," she whispered. "It is. That's why. I want you to take a few days to think. But know this. We're building something global, and you are the soul that makes it connect." She didn't speak immediately. Her eyes were locked on the city's skyline, then flicked toward Carter. Samir leaned back. "There's just one more thing. The position requires a flexible base, Zafira, or Seoul. Not Miami, at least. Not for the first year." Now, it was Carter's turn to shift. "That's a lot of distance," he said carefully. "It is. But so is the impact." The waiter arrived, interrupting the silence with plates of Zadar flatbread, citrus-dressed salads, and pomegranate lamb. But no one touched the food. Layla looked down at her hands, once cracked from cleaning chemicals. Now, they were being trusted to shape cross-cultural empires. "Samir, thank you. This is more than I ever imagined. Because you are more than most people imagine. Then he stood. I'll leave you two to think. Call me when you're ready. After he left, Carter finally spoke. What are you thinking? Layla looked at him, unsure whether to smile or cry. I'm thinking this is everything I've worked for. And I'm terrified of the job. No, of losing you while chasing it. Carter took a long breath. Then maybe we don't have to choose. Maybe we figure out how to make both work. If you say yes to this, I'll say yes to something. To what? He smiled faintly. To following you instead of always expecting you to follow me. That night, Layla stood barefoot on the marble balcony of her hotel suite, overlooking the glowing city of Zafira. The skyline looked like a constellation of ambition. Towers, lights, dreams materialized in steel and glass done in her hand. She held the formal offer letter from Samir's team. Her name, her title, her future. But all she could think about was Carter, the man who flew across the world not for a deal, but for her. The knock at the door broke her thoughts. Carter stepped in, holding 2 cups of tea. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, his face soft in the low lamplight. You didn't sleep either? He asked gently. Layla shook her head. My brain's louder than the city. He handed her a cup and leaned against the railing beside her. So, what's your heart saying? Layla looked at him, then out toward the skyline. It says, yes, I want this. I want the job, want the challenge. Carter nodded slowly, then take it. Even if it means living in Zafira or Seoul for a year. Layla, he said, turning to face her fully, I want to build a life with you, not build fences around you. If this is where your path leads, then I'll find a way to walk it with you. But your company can be managed, grown, shifted, just like you had to shift your whole world to survive. I can shift mine to love. Her eyes welled up. You'd really do that? Already decided. He pulled a small envelope from his pocket and handed it to her. Inside was a one-way plane ticket. Not for her, but for him. From Los Sols to Zafira. Open date. You're not the only one allowed to take bold steps. Layla laughed through tears. Carter, say yes to the job, to the life, to us. She looked at him, eyes full of gratitude, love, and awe. Yes, yes to all of it. They stood in silence for a moment, the kind that only 2 people who see each other completely can share. Then Carter whispered, we're one yes away from everything we ever dreamed. And with the city glowing behind them, Layla leaned into him, not just as a woman in love, but as a woman finally stepping into her destiny. 3 weeks later, Layla sat at a long mahogany table in a boardroom on the 73rd floor of Zafira Global headquarters. She wasn't there as a guest. She was leading the meeting, slides projected on the wall. Behind her showed cross-cultural hospitality models, user behavior heat maps, and brand expansion strategies. Executives from 4 countries nodded along, while Samir sat at the head of the table, proud but silent, letting Layla shine. We don't just want international reach, she said, voice steady. We want cultural resonance, 'cause modern luxury isn't about what you offer. It's about how deeply you understand who you're serving. Applause followed as she ended her presentation. One Japanese partner leaned to a French investor and said, I'd follow her into any market. When the meeting ended, Samir walked beside her down the hallway. You just closed 3 contracts in 2 hours, he said. That's a record. Because I had a team behind me, Layla replied. He chuckled. No, because you finally stepped in front of the team. Back at the apartment Carter had temporarily rented in Zafira, he sat on a sofa covered in building, blueprints and cafe receipts. When Layla arrived, she collapsed beside him, barefoot, blazer off, hair slightly undone. Tell me it was worth moving continents for, he teased. Depends. Do I still get you at the end of the day? Always. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. Samir offered me something else today. Another promotion? It's worse. A partnership. As in, let's build a company together. Him, me. And he asked if you'd be willing to be the 3rd partner. Carter stared at her. He wants all 3 of us, Samir said. You're the cultural soul. He's the business engine, and I'm the bridge. That actually makes sense. Layla grinned. I told him I'd talk to you first. I know it's a lot. It is, Carter said, pausing. Then he leaned forward. But so is everything worth doing? So, you'd consider it? I'd consider anything that keeps me building beside you. Layla's heart tightened, not with fear this time, but with certainty. Carter, are we crazy? Of course we are. But the best stories always start with two crazy people who refuse to do things the normal way. They both laughed, and they started scribbling on napkins and sketch pads, designing logos, naming options, business models. By midnight, 2 bottles of sparkling water later, they had a rough plan. Bennett Marino, global bridging cultures, building futures. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was theirs. A week later, Layla stood in front of a mirror inside a bridal atelier in central Zafira. The dress wasn't finished yet, just pinned into place, but the reflection staring back at her didn't look like a former maid, or even a consultant. She looked like a woman who was finally allowed to choose her life. I still don't know if I want silk or lace, Layla said, half laughing, half panicking. Across the room, Carter sat on a velvet settee, holding a laptop open on one knee and a bouquet sample on the other. Babe, you just negotiated a global licensing deal in 2 languages this morning. You can pick a neckline. This feels scarier. You already said yes to me exactly. What if I mess up the rest? He closed the laptop and walked over, gently resting his hands on her waist as she stood in the mock dress. Layla Moreno. You could walk down the aisle in a tailored pantsuit with a laptop in one hand and I'd still cry like a fool. She looked up at him, touched. You say things like that, and I forget I'm terrified. That's kind of the point. They both laughed. The kind of laughter that comes from surviving things separately and finally thriving together. That night, over dinner on their apartment balcony, the topic shifted. What if we made a rule? Carter said suddenly. Uh-oh, you and rules. A fun one. Like a wager. Okay, I'm listening. He leaned forward. Whoever secures our first independent global contract, not through Samir, not through old clients, gets to choose the wedding destination. Layla smirked. You're assuming I'm going to let you win? Oh, I know I won't. That's why I already started planning Zafira. Bad bet, Bennett. I already pitched a soul. Oh, it's on. They high-fived, then interlocked fingers. No matter who wins, Layla said, we both end up building the same future. God, it's beautiful, Carter whispered. Just like you. 2 weeks later, Layla stepped off a flight at Incheon International Airport. Her heart racing, not from nerves, but from anticipation. She was in Seoul for a short trip, part pitch meeting, part exploration. Carter had gone to Zafira to finalize a logistics hub proposal of his own. Both were chasing the same goal, the first solo win of their new company. But for Layla, this wasn't just business. It was a chance to prove she could stand alone, even while deeply in love, after a whirlwind of meetings, presentations, and one impromptu dinner with a Korean cultural liaison officer who adored Layla's fluent greeting in formal Korean. The unexpected happened, a knock on her hotel door. It was the CEO of the Korean development group she had pitched to just 2 days before, Miss Moreno, he said, offering a respectful bow. Your proposal has been accepted. We would like to begin with a 6-month cultural integration initiative in Seoul, with you leading the entire strategy. Layla blinked. You're offering a full campaign? And a permanent presence here if it works? The board was impressed, not just by your understanding of Korean culture, but your way of honoring it. She nodded, stunned but calm. Thank you. I'll respond formally after I return to Zafira. Of course, but please consider it carefully. After he left, she closed the door, leaned against it, smiled to herself. Seoul, 1. Zafira, 0. When she returned to Zafira, Carter was already waiting at the airport, grinning like he knew. Something, how was it? Let's just say, she replied, slipping her arm through his. You might need to start learning Korean. So I lost? No, we both won, but technically, I get to pick the wedding location, Carter groaned. Playfully, Please tell me it's not a winter palace. Nope. Seoul Botanical Garden. Cherry blossom season. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. Perfect. Just like you. It was the first day of spring in Seoul, and the Seoul Botanical Garden bloomed in breathtaking layers of pink, white, and blush. Guests from over 15 countries filled the seats. Beneath an open-air canopy, framed by Japanese cherry trees and hand-woven silk lanterns, each marked with the phrase "One Love." Many tongues in a different language, Layla stood in front of a tall mirror inside the bridal suite, wearing a custom gown, hand-embroidered by artisans in 3 cities, lace from Zafira, silk from Seoul, and pearls from Lost Souls. Beside her, her mother wiped away tears and whispered in Spanish, "To Papa estaría tan orgulloso." Your father would be so proud? Layla nodded. I carry him with me, in every word I speak. On the other side of the garden, Carter adjusted his tie, a deep midnight blue that matched the accent on Layla's gown. His best man. Samir patted his shoulder. You, ready to marry a woman who speaks 6 languages and negotiates better than both of us combined? I've never been more ready. As the music swelled, Layla walked down the aisle, her steps steady, her eyes locked on Carter. Every vow, every gesture in the ceremony was chosen with cultural intention. The blessing was spoken in Arabic, English, and Korean. The exchange of rings was accompanied by 6 words: home, heart, honor, respect, growth, legacy, each in a different language. Layla spoke. The unity ritual involved blending soil from all 3 cities that shaped their journey. Zafira, Lost Souls, and Seoul. When the officiant declared, "You may now seal this promise," Kata took her hands and whispered in Spanish, "Ahora somos uno." Now we are one. Then he kissed her. 6 months after their unforgettable wedding in Seoul, Layla sat in the VIP lounge at Incheon Airport, sipping ginger tea. Her sleek navy maternity blazer couldn't quite hide the growing curve of her belly. Across from her, Carter stood near the boarding gate with 2 passports, briefcase, and a collapsible baby bassinet. You know, he said with a grin, most newlyweds wait longer than 6 months to go global and start a family. Layla smiled. We've never been most couples. They were flying to Zurich for a major presentation. Layla would be unveiling a new branch of Bennett Marino Global focused on multilingual corporate diplomacy. It was already being dubbed the future of international trust building. As they boarded, the flight attendant greeted them. Welcome aboard. First class is ready. Correction, Carter said proudly. Business class, ... With baby prep mode, he installed the small travel bassinet into the pod seat next to Layla's and slid her noise-canceling headphones into her bag. You're going to be amazing, he said, brushing her hair back. I already am, she whispered, placing a hand on her belly. And so is she. Carter blinked. She, Layla smirked. You didn't check the results from the doctor? I was waiting until we were together. Well, surprise, it's a girl. Carter let out a breath of awe and emotion. A daughter, who will probably speak at least 4 languages before kindergarten. He laughed, tears in his eyes. Layla, what are we even doing? Changing the world. One culture, one conversation, one child at a time. They held hands as the plane took off, their fingers laced, their future wide open. 2 years later, Geneva, Switzerland, the grand auditorium of the World Cultural Innovation Forum buzzed with anticipation. Delegates, entrepreneurs, and educators from more than 40 nations filled the velvet seats. At center stage, under soft amber lighting, stood Layla Moreno Bennett, now a mother, CEO and cultural diplomat recognized globally. Behind her, a screen displaying the company logo. Bennett Moreno Global, Bridging Cultures, Building Legacy. She adjusted the microphone and began. 2 years ago, I was asked to consult on a hotel. Today, I lead a movement, not because I'm smarter, richer, or luckier, but because someone let me answer a phone call. Laughter rippled through the audience. Many knew her story. I speak 6 languages. Felt unheard. I clean homes with a degree in linguistics no one wanted to see, until one man chose to see me. challenged me to see myself again. Carter sat in the front row, holding their toddler daughter Amira, now dozing on his shoulder with a stuffed koala in her lap. Layla continued, "Today, our firm trains companies to communicate across cultures, not just linguistically, but humanly. Because miscommunication doesn't start in language, it starts in the heart." She paused. "This is not just about contracts or cross-border deals. This is about dignity, visibility, voice." Thunderous applause erupted. Later that evening, in their hotel suite overlooking Lake Geneva, Carter poured 2 glasses of sparkling cider. "To you, to her." He nodded toward Amira, now babbling happily with a plastic globe. Layla clinked her glass with his. "To us, to every dream that waited patiently while we cleaned floors or waited tables. Every voice that stayed quiet, waiting to be trusted. And to the next generation," Carter added, lifting Amira into his lap, "who will never doubt their right to be heard in any language." They watched the lake shimmer under the moonlight, their hands intertwined. Hearts full not of dreams they chased, but dreams they'd already begun to live. In every overlooked talent, there's a legacy waiting to be unlocked. In every silenced voice, a language that can heal the world. When we choose to truly see one another across class, language, and culture, we don't just build careers or love stories. We build bridges that last for generations. If this story moved you, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe for more. Millionaire stories, rich man, poor woman tales, and inspiring story content every week. Comment below. What language would you love to learn if it could change your life?